Okay, so my talk today is in English, but I have provided subtitles in French, but in Google French. So I have no idea the quality of the translation, but I thought it would be useful so that everybody can understand a little. And the talk is in two parts. The first part is a little bit about our institute and about the capacity building we try to do in the Old World Tropics. And the second part is about applying for grants. Okay. So the first part is about our institution, and we have a simple website. And if you want to learn more about what we do, if you think it is relevant, having seen the talk, then here is the website address, and you will find that on the webinar that Ellie sends around after this talk. So what we're committed to doing is really three things. We want to support biodiversity conservation, but we're not conservationists ourselves. Our main interest is research, but research working with local people and principally in capacity building. And all of this information is also available on a master plan, which is also downloadable, which gives you, again, more information about what we do. Our institute was founded in 1930. It was founded by a rich family called the Harrisons, who had a shipping line, and it is based in Southeast England. Originally, it was a private natural history museum, and it concentrated on birds. Today, it is a UK charity, which means it's eligible for many grants, and it has a status where it doesn't have to pay tax, and it has an international status as a UK charity for working with people all over the world. So this gives us an advantage. It's non-governmental, which is also an advantage in applying for grants. And as though not a university, it still has a status when applying for grants that is kind of equal to a university. It focuses on the study of mammals and birds. And as I said, it collaborates with colleagues around the world. And we work a lot with Europeans. You can see here at the bottom, there's half an EU flag. And this is because this particular project that I show a photograph of here was in Myanmar in Southeast Asia, but we worked with universities from Germany, from Austria, and from Spain. So what is our mission? What do we actually try to do in the Harrison Institute? Well, our mission is to enable and empower the next generation of young biodiversity scientists and conservationists. So many of you in the audience would be our prime target. You are the people that we would like to help if you need help, and you are the people that we have worked with, say, for the last 20 to 30 years of our life in building capacity. The Institute has three principal objectives. As I say, building capacity. And how do we do this? Through training, through co-supervising MSc and PhD students, through long-term mentoring. So it's not just that you work with us for a year, but you'd work with us for many years. And if you want to stay in contact, then we support you and mentor you over the long term. And we're particularly interested in people from Africa and tropical Asia. And our second mission is not just capacity building, but what do we do with our capacity building? And the point of capacity building is to do research, biodiversity research. And I was trained as a taxonomist, so I'm particularly interested in the diversity of mammals, in small mammals, and especially bats. And during my time at the Harrison Institute, I have helped name some 17 species, all of these since 2004. These are mammal species, primarily bats, but also some rodents. And you can see from the map on the bottom right that we have worked through much of Old World Tropics. And our bat species come from a diverse number of countries. We also have in our team people who are interested in community conservation. So though we're not primarily a conservation organization, we have kind of branched out into some element of conservation, and particularly in providing what they call poverty alleviation, alternative livelihoods. So that here we link training of academics and then also training of local communities to actually put practical conservation into the field. And you can see Beatrix in the red t-shirt in the top left picture, and she is one of our team. And here you can see her working in a village in Southeast Asia. And we're teaching the local people not only about wildlife, but also about how to make money and about ecotourism. You can see at the top right, we built a lodge for ecotourists to come and visit the village. And this was all about protecting a very rare river dolphin that lived in the Irrawaddy River. And where do we work? So initially, the mammal part of the project of the institute studied in Arabia. It was very focused on Arabia. Then it spread more into Southern Asia, Southeast Asia, but also in Africa. And the map is not entirely accurate because, as Ellie said, I was working in Ethiopia with her some 25 years ago. So we have experience of working in Ethiopia. We've also had conferences down in South Africa. We've worked in Zambia. And now our interest in Africa is expanding. And so if your particular country has not got a yellow smudge over it at the moment, that does not mean that we're not interested in it. It just means that we would try to be somewhat realistic when we drew this map, not cover the whole of Africa with such a small institution as ourselves. We did a lot of capacity building in Southeast Asia. And how did we do it? Well, we started, I guess, in about 2001, and we started in one country. But soon we thought that working in one country is not enough because the animals do not understand the borders. And what we really need to do is work in a region. And we were very lucky that in 2005, we got a British government grant, and working with a university in the south of Thailand, we started to build a training hub. And the aim of the hub was to train students in appropriate science, so at an appropriate price. So it's very expensive to bring students to Western countries such as the UK. The fees are high, there's a high cost of living, and also the animals are not relevant to the area they're working in. So what we thought was, this is great that some people come to the West, but we can't do this for everybody. What we must also do is build some training capacity in the tropics itself. So we worked very closely with the university, and they were brilliant, and it was a brilliant university to work with. And we started to bring in students from a range of different countries. And here you can see the hub in blue, and we brought students in from Bhutan, from Myanmar, from Vietnam, from Cambodia, and you'll see also one from Zambia. And the idea was that instead of people learning in isolated in different universities where they didn't have support in their particular subject within their university, that they would get support from each other and from the experts that we could bring in, and they would learn faster and easier if they all work together. And why did we bring someone in from Zambia? Because we felt that, again, it is cheaper than sending someone to UK, but also more interesting for that person to learn about the biodiversity of a region that is kind of similar but different, and also from a different culture, and to meet people who are doing the same kind of thing from the same kind of background, and to be part of a South-South group. And this particular guy, Christopher, blended in perfectly with the team from Southeast Asia. And he was very popular, and he was a very successful member of the team. And how did we pay for it all? Well, we had a series of 3 grants. The first grant was just for one country. This was before the hub. The second grant in 2005 was for 4 countries. You can see here from Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. And this was for MSc students. And then the third grant was to convert the MSc students into PhD students. and it was a brilliant program. Unfortunately, Darwin, who gave us the money, then changed the rules, and we were no longer able to apply for grants just for taxonomy. So what did we do? As I've already mentioned, we mentored, trained, and supervised the students. We collaborated on joint publications and always tried to make sure that where the students had done the work, that they were the first authors. And this became extremely successful. And they, as part of their MSc and PhD studies, they described many new species. I will show you in a minute. And we also assisted the students to apply for grants to cover costs of their fieldwork. And I included this part to the slide. I don't want you to read it all. I just want you to look at the red rings. This is to show that the students, in almost every case, were the first authors of the papers. They were the first authors because they'd done the research. They were the first authors because they'd written the papers. They were the first authors because that was their right. And though to start with, the writing of the papers may have been a bit sketchy, a bit needing help, we worked with them and we worked with them until after a time, many of them became highly proficient at writing their own papers and just sent them to us for us to look through and to make corrections here and there. In addition to supervising students, we also tried to make the institutions we worked with are kind of international centers. And how to do this? We thought the best way is to put on conferences. So we put on, with our Thai colleagues, we co-hosted the first Southeast Asian bird conference. We hosted the first Southeast Asian bat conference. And both of these now have regular, I think it's every 3 years, they have a conference in different countries within their region. And then at a bigger scale, we put on an international bat conference in Thailand with 400 delegates from over 50 countries. And this is a very nice way of announcing that your institution is international, that you are open to international collaboration, and that you want to be taken seriously on the international stage. It is also actually comparatively easier than one thinks. It is, if you have a bit of support money, it is relatively easy to get people to come to your country. Often they're very intrigued if they haven't been there before, and providing it looks like a good program, you'll be amazed how many people want to come and join in your program. And what do our former students do now? I think I can say with almost no exceptions, they are all either employed in universities or in schools. 2 went on to win international awards from the North American Bat Research Group. And many have had follow-up scholarships to do, say, PhDs in UK, Europe, China, and Japan. And though we trained most of them as taxonomists, as systematists, as studying phylogenetics, what are they doing now? So some are still doing inventories, still doing taxonomy, still working in museums within their universities. Others are doing, such as a teacher in the middle picture below, are doing citizen science projects with their schools. And we've got a very nice project in Bhutan where the schools are actually doing the research and the doing a management plan for an IBA, which is opposite the school, an important bird area opposite the school. Others branched out using their taxonomic knowledge to look at pests of tropical agriculture, that was rodents, and also rodent and bat-borne diseases, which is obviously very relevant in today's coronavirus era. Some are doing conservation, and some are doing aspects of ecotourism. So it's a wide range of subjects that they're now doing, applied subjects as well as just science. And I want to just show you 2 examples of our students, so you can perhaps imagine that you might be one of these if you are a student watching this. So Dr. Pipat, when I first met him, he was very young. And he was working at the university in Thailand as a researcher in the museum. He got his MSc and PhD working with us. He won this award in the United States. He's published 30 papers as a first author and has described 1 genus and 8 species of bat new to science. He is now recognized as an international expert on the subject and is in high demand internationally at conferences, at workshops, as well as in his own country. He not only does research, he joined a UNESCO team to look at World Heritage project in the north of Myanmar in Asia, looking at where he did research on the bat fauna of this forest area. He also was working for Fauna and Flora International, which is a conservation organization. He came with us to Arabia, where he was leading a team training Omani students and young scientists in bat research. And he's also trained numerous people and school groups in Thailand. It's not just the boys, it's also the girls. Pimsai is an expert on rodents. She did her MSc with us. She also has gone to other countries. She's been kind of headhunted to run rodent projects in Thailand, in Myanmar, and in Cambodia. She's also joined a World Heritage project, and she's just been awarded a scholarship for a PhD in Japan. So it shows, and when I first met her, she was just a shy Thai girl who could barely speak any English. And yet that shy Thai girl is now an international figure of extreme importance in Southeast Asian rodents. So what are the Harrison Institute in Africa? Well, we have a long history of working in Africa, especially on small mammals, rodents and bats. And we have already contributed to training workshops and conferences in Ethiopia back in the late 1990s, much more recently in Nigeria and in Zambia and in South Africa. And our focus has moved towards work in West Africa and in Central Africa. But next month, for instance, I'm in Zambia, and there's a workshop in Zambia that we're running. And we're also talking to people in Mozambique. So we are capacity building wherever we can and wherever we can afford to do and wherever there's interest within Africa. What does that mean? Well, for example, the lady in the middle, we've just taken her on as a PhD student, and we're co-supervising her with Cameroonian and Vienna University supervisors from a university in Vienna. So it would be very nice to build a network to promote bat and, of course, bird research throughout West Africa, or perhaps at a broader level. And for me, one of my interests would be to integrate the scientific communities from the different languages, different communities that speak different languages within Africa. So there's the French, English, Spanish, and Portuguese speaking communities. And it seems to me that it's a big shame that they tend to work a little bit in isolation. And our experience in Southeast Asia says that this is not necessary. So, for example, if you look at the top diagram on the right, you can see we brought everybody together in one central hub. And as I'll show you in the next slide, these people all spoke different languages, and English was not actually a main language for any of them. Yet in the end, because of the international nature of English for science, they all spoke good English, they all wrote in English, and they all communicated with each other in English, as that was the linked language. And I think this is perhaps a good model for Africa, or maybe a model which is less centralized, where there are centers of expertise in different countries. But I would always say, and here maybe there would be a centers for, if it was bat work in acoustic monitoring or acoustic surveying, there might be an expertise, say, in Cameroons. In another country, there might be an expertise in taxonomy and another landscape ecology. And people go to those different universities from elsewhere in Africa to learn from the people how to do the subject. But what I would strongly recommend is that the different language communities try to mix together, so that not all the English-speaking African countries go to one and all the French-speaking to another and all the Portuguese go to another. I think it would be much more advantageous if the different communities work together. And I think the Southeast Asian model shows that this is possible. My second part of my talk is about applying for a grant. I think you should all, whenever you're doing a project, you should always think about getting money from a grant to do the project. It is very difficult to use your own money. It's very hard to come by money. And you can do a better project if you have more resources. But of course, a lot of people have no experience of applying for a grant, and there's no, maybe no experience even within the department. So I put together this little short part of the talk just to say how you might approach it. Now, in my opinion, it is almost impossible to get your first grant without somebody helping you from the outside who's already got a grant. It is not that simple. But once you've started, you find it becomes a habit, and you can be more successful. And indeed, you can be very successful, especially if you come from Africa and everybody knows money is hard to come by. Everybody knows that your institutions are not wealthy. So actually, you're in a very good position for applying for small grants. I think applying for a grant is not a science so much as an art form. It's like building a relationship. You have to, if you're building a relationship, say I was building a relationship with a girl, I've got to be, there's certain things I've got to be. I've got to be trustworthy. I've got to look like what I'm saying is true. What I say I can do, but I can't be too boring. I've got to have something that's interesting. So I have to have a little bit of innovation, a little bit of interest. And this is exactly what you're doing when you're writing a project. You're trying to attract the funder, who has many applications, but he or she cannot fund each application. You're trying to say to them, please fund me as opposed to the other person. And so there are certain rules, certain ways of playing the game, but it's also a very logical process. And we'll start with the logic. The first thing you have to do is to select a grant-giving body that supports your kind of project. So if you're interested in nature conservation, look for a funder that supports nature conservation. It sounds obvious, but actually people don't focus on necessarily on the right funding agency, or they apply for something that the funding agency does not support. You also have to think, how much experience do I have? If it's your first grant application, you have to go for a small grant. You can get grants up to 12 million euros, but they're never going to give it to you. They're only going to give you a grant that they think you are capable of dealing with at your career stage. So, for example, the Rufford here gives up to 6,000 UK pounds, which is about 6,600 euros. And then you also have to think, how long do I want this project for? Do I want it for 1 year or 3 years? Normally, when you're starting, you ask for a 1-year project. And if you look on the right, this is the eligibility for Rufford. You see it's for nature conservation. So if you're interested in that, you can tick that. Yes, that's good. It must be in a developed country. Yes, you can tick that. It must be, I can't see the bit underneath that, but it must be on an endangered species. Yeah, it has to be on that. You have to include an endangered species. And it's usually for people who are doing their MSc or PhD students or early career scientists. Obviously, you don't have to read everything on the right, but I'm just saying, read carefully the general criteria of what the funding agency supports. They nearly all supply these details. You have to read them, you have to understand them, you have to follow them. And you will not be successful if the grant is aimed for students or early career scientists and you're 45 years old and you're already an associate professor. They will just not fund you. If in some fundings, maybe specifically for some countries or for some habitat, if your country or your habitat is the wrong habitat, don't apply. They will not, they cannot give you the money. And if the projects, if the funding is for conservation, you cannot submit a taxonomic project, for example, because they won't fund you. But there are ways of making a taxonomic project into a conservation project, and I will show you that very briefly later. I say this because actually thousands of hours are wasted on applications that are rejected immediately. If you look at how many, sometimes a funding agency may get 900 applications, and they may immediately remove 450 of those for not being eligible, i.e. they're applying for something that the funding does not cover, and they will just be thrown out. And the poor people have spent hours and hours and hours writing these applications, and it's all a complete waste of time. And often the funding agencies spell out clearly what is excluded. So, for example, Rough would say they will not fund pure research with no conservation benefit. So if you're asking for a research project and you're not saying why this can be translated into conservation, they will not fund you. So don't write the application. Think of another way of writing it and then submit that. Often, if you're not sure whether they will fund what you're doing, you have to look for what is called frequently asked questions. And here you will see them answering all the questions that they've been asked or they think they should have been asked, and they will try and help you before you start applying, about thinking about what you want to apply for and how you might apply. Also, you can look at the geographical area of where they fund. So is your country on the map? If your country is on the map and it's already got a color, that means they will fund you if you've got the right application. If your country's got a dark color, it shows they've funded a lot of projects there already. Now, this can be an advantage or it can be a disadvantage. Sometimes funders are human and they love the thought of funding a new country. So, for example, on the map of Africa, Equatorial Guinea is still white. So if they get an application from Equatorial Guinea, they think, oh, that's nice. We can color in the final little dot in Central West Africa. So this is all, it's all about psychology. So use your psychology. So if you're in an underfunded country, say very few funds have been here. This is why it's important. If you're in a country that's had a lot of funding, you could say this builds on the successful programs we've already had from Rufford in our country. So you're trying to make the funding agency feel secure about giving you money. How do we go about planning an application? Well, it needs to be focused. It must not be too broad. You can't claim with your 6,000 euros that you're going to save all the biodiversity of your country. You are going to have it focused on one particular subject, and this must look like it's feasible. Feasible means, can I complete it within the timetable, within the budget, and within the manpower that I have available, and within the skills that I have available? As I said before, it needs to be appealing and interesting, because the poor reviewers may have 30, 40, 50 applications to go through, but only 5 to give money to. They need to think, to remember your application as being, oh, that was interesting. So you have to put something in it's the interesting, appealing, innovative for people to see. And the results have to be valuable. So it's no good writing a project that is feasible, focused, has no appeal, and is not much value, because it will be rejected. This goes back to what I said before. If the funder's interest is conservation and your interest is taxonomy, you have to find a middle ground between your interest and the funder's interest. If you say, I just want to study the taxonomy of bats in Cameroon forests, they are not going to fund you. But if you say, I want to know about what species of bat are threatened because of the deforestation of Cameroon forests in this particular area, then they will be more interested, and you get to do your taxonomy, they get to get a conservation outcome, and you're both happy. But you have to write your application to suit the topics that and the criteria that the funder supports. If you're not sure how to write an application or what kind of thing they will support, they usually, on most funding agencies, they have an example of projects that they're funding, and you can go through and you can even select them. Often there's a way of filtering them so that you just see. So if you're interested in bats, for example, from Africa, you put in bats in Africa and up come these projects. Or if it's birds and Africa, up come these projects. And by reading them and by reading the titles and by reading the abstracts, you learn about what kind of things that this funder is keen to support. And often you can, if you're new to it, you can use one of the examples as a kind of template for your project. So you can build your project around something that you know has been funded in the past. This is too detailed to go through now, but if people want to look at it later. But this is how most applications work. You have to tell the funder a little bit about what is known about your subject, but only a little bit. What is not known about your subject, i.e. we don't know this. How are we going to approach so that we fill in the knowledge gap, i.e. the don't know bit? And why is that important? And how am I going to apply the results within a conservation context? And nearly every application works on that principle. And once you've learned that, you can adapt it for whether it's a big grant or a small grant. And the approach is called articulating your idea. So, and the good thing about applying for a grant is it often makes you have to really think about your project. Because many of us start our projects with activities. We start by doing something, but we don't really know exactly why we're doing it. What is the aim? What are we trying to achieve? What are the outputs that we're trying to achieve? Well, most funding projects will ask you, what is your aim? What are your objectives? What are your outputs? What activities are you going to do? And what is the sustainable outcome of your project? And actually, though it's very tiring filling in these forms, it's a very useful way of making you think carefully about the project you intend to do. You write your application, and then you should show it to somebody else, but don't show them a very early draft because they will get bored. They're not there to do it for you. They're there to help you at the end. So when you've got a really nice application, then share it around and people will see, oh, but this is not quite logical, or have you thought about this? And this is where you start to improve your application. And we all do this. It doesn't matter how many applications you've written, everybody shares their application and asks for advice. Then you will need referees, and the referee is important because the referee, if the funder hasn't heard of you, hopefully they've heard of your referee, and they will read this carefully. They will read, does the referee, the person who knows you, think you can do the project? Does the referee, who may know a lot about the subject, think the subject's important? Now, usually the referee will write you a nice application because that's why you've chosen them. But often, too, if the referee is really unsure, they will write a nice one, but it will have enough ambiguity in it that the funding agency will think, not so sure about this. So who do you choose as a referee? Someone who knows you is very important, but also somebody who actually has time to write the referee letter, because if the funding agency does not get the letter, they cannot give you the grant. So you have to really make sure that your referee will actually submit a letter on time. And that person needs to have some credibility. You know, it cannot be your mum. It cannot be your best friend in the department, because a letter from these people would obviously not have any credibility at all. You would be amazed how random the selection process is for many grants. There tends to be people sitting around a table and there's, say, 20 good grants and 20 good applications for 5 remaining places. And people don't know how to choose between these 20. And they will say, does anyone know this person? And if somebody knows that person, that's the first advantage. So this is why it's very important to be on things like this Fridays for Birds every week, because people start to know you. People from abroad start to, oh, I think he's or she's on this thing every Friday. I see her. She gave a talk or blah, blah, blah. That's the first thing. The second thing is, do we know the person who wrote the referee's letter? And if they do, and they think, oh, yeah, she's pretty good. I've known about that. And she's written a pretty nice letter about this person. Then that's another good thing. So you need to make sure, if you're applying for an international grant, you need to put yourself out there. You need to make sure people are starting to know you, and this will help you to get the grant. And finally, submit the grant. And I always prepare myself for rejection. I always think, okay, I'm not going to get this grant. And then when I do get the grant, I'm happy. It's the better way around than thinking, I'm sure I'm going to get the grant, then you're disappointed. Everybody is rejected at some time or other. Nobody gets all the grants they apply for. Some people get more, a higher percentage, some people get less, but nobody gets all of them. But I would say that if you have a good project, you should always apply for a grant. It should be automatic. It's important for two reasons. One, it gives you money to do the project, and two, because it really makes you think how to plan that project. So on that note, I'm going to end. And if there are any questions, or people can follow up later, or we can talk about grant getting in more detail at some other time, or whatever Ellie would like to do. So thank you very much.